The stars twinkled in the vast emptiness of space as the USS Endeavour moved slowly at the edge of our solar system. Captain John Miller stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the main screen. He had been in space for 15 years, but he had never seen anything like the ship that now appeared before them. "What do we know about it?" John asked, his voice calm despite the tension in the room. Susan White, the ship's language expert, shook her head. "Nothing yet, Captain. It's not answering our calls." The strange ship was 3 times the size of the Endeavour. It had a smooth black surface that seemed to swallow light rather than reflect it. It moved with a grace that human ships could not match. "Keep trying," John ordered. He turned to his science officer. "George, what can you tell me?" George Rivera studied the readings on his screen. "Their power levels are off the charts, Captain, and I'm picking up some kind of energy field around them. Could be a shield much more advanced than ours." Suddenly, the main screen flickered. A face appeared, but it wasn't human. The being had gray skin with small ridges along its hairless head. Its eyes were large, solid black with no visible white or pupil. "This is Commander Kaz's tool of the Zeth Imperial Scout Vessel," the alien said in perfect English. "Your primitive signals have been translated. You will now listen." John stepped forward. "This is Captain John Miller of the Earth vessel USS Endeavour. We come in peace and wish to—" "Silence," the alien cut him off. "The Galactic Empire has existed for 30,000 of your years. We have brought order to 200 species. Now it is your turn. The Zeth hierarchy has decided your fate. You will surrender your planet and accept your place in our empire." The bridge crew looked at each other in shock. Susan moved closer to her computer, recording every word. "We don't surrender our home without discussion," John said firmly. "We propose a meeting to talk about peaceful relations between our peoples." The alien made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You misunderstand. This is not a negotiation. You are a pre-FTL primitive species. Your place in our system is already decided. You have 30 Earth days to prepare your leaders for our arrival. Resistance will result in pacification." The screen went dark. "Did they just threaten to attack Earth?" asked Alan Peters, the ship's tactical officer. "I believe they did," John replied. He turned to Susan. "What did you get from that conversation?" Susan's face was grim as she looked up from her computer. "Their language contains many subtle clues, Captain. They use terms for us that suggest we're seen as lesser beings. The word they used that translated as place actually has connotations of service or labor in their speech patterns. They plan to enslave us," George said quietly. John nodded. "Peters, how do their weapons compare to ours, based on what you can detect?" Alan's face paled as he checked his readings. "We're outmatched, Captain. Their energy readings suggest weapons at least 50 years beyond our current technology, and that's being optimistic." "Captain," Susan called out, "they're moving away. Fast, much faster than we can follow." John watched the alien ship shrink on the screen until it vanished among the stars. "Set course for Earth. Maximum speed. We need to warn everyone." 3 days later, the United Earth Defense Council gathered in their underground headquarters in Geneva. Leaders from all major nations sat around a large round table, their faces showing various degrees of fear and resolve as they watched the recording from the Endeavour. "Could this be some kind of joke?" asked the representative from Brazil. "I wish it were," John replied. "But we've confirmed their ship's technology is far beyond ours, and they've been watching us. They knew our language too well for this to be a first encounter." Kate Johnson, Earth's leading engineer in shield technology, spoke up. "Our current defenses wouldn't last minutes against what Captain Miller's team described." "Then we surrender?" asked the Chinese delegate. "No," said John firmly. "We fight. Every species that has a right to exist has a right to fight for that existence." Alan Peters, now consulting with Earth's military, pulled up some charts on the main screen. "Based on what we know, they have us beat in speed, firepower, and numbers. But they've never faced humans before, and we have something they might not expect." "What's that?" asked the Russian representative. "Creativity, adaptability. They've ruled for 30,000 years. That suggests stagnation. They expect us to follow their rules of engagement. Kate nodded eagerly. And their technology, while advanced, follows predictable patterns. My team has been analyzing the scan data. Their shields operate on principles we understand, just at a more advanced level. We might be able to find weaknesses. We have 27 days left, said the American president. What can we accomplish in that time? More than they expect, Kate replied. She pulled up designs on her tablet. I've been working on an experimental shield system that operates on completely different principles than standard deflection technology. It absorbs energy rather than deflecting it. It's never been practical because of heat buildup, but as a short-term defense. George Rivera, who had come with Captain Miller, added, and I've been analyzing their communication patterns. Their entire civilization seems built on hierarchy and predictability. They expect us to either surrender completely or fight according to conventional military doctrine. Susan White joined in. Their language reveals a species that hasn't faced a serious challenge in millennia. They use terms that suggest routine when discussing our pacification. This is standard procedure for them. As the meeting continued into the night, plans began to form. Earth would not surrender, nor would it fight the way the Empire expected. Factory production lines across the globe were retooled, military forces reorganized, research labs worked around the clock. On day 26, the first Imperial ships appeared at the edge of the solar system. There were 50 of them, each larger than the scout vessel had been. Earth's long-range sensors detected them immediately. In orbit, Earth's combined fleet waited. The ships were few and technologically inferior, but they had been modified with Kate's new shields and armed with weapons designed specifically to exploit potential weaknesses in Imperial technology. Captain John Miller stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned USS Defiant, Earth's first true warship. Susan sat at communications, George at science, and Alan at tactical stations. Kate had remained on Earth coordinating the ground defenses. This is it, John said to his crew. The first battle in what might be a long war. But remember this, they expect us to be predictable. They expect us to be primitive. Let's show them how wrong they are. The Imperial fleet moved into the solar system, their formation perfect and unchanging. They had done this hundreds of times before to other species. They expected no surprises. They were about to make their first mistake. 6 months passed. Earth burned. Cities lay in ruins. Millions had died. But humanity had not surrendered. Dr. William Clark worked in an underground lab, his face thin from too little food and too little sleep. Around him, 20 scientists studied, pieces of Imperial technology salvaged from downed ships. They had been working for months, slowly understanding how the alien devices worked. I think I've got it, William said suddenly, looking up from a circular device the size of his palm. This is their FTL drive control, and I understand how it works. The other scientists gathered around him. One asked, "Can we build our own?" William shook his head. Not yet, but we can disrupt theirs. He smiled for the first time in weeks. And that might be enough. In orbit, the battle continued every day. The Imperial fleet had grown to over 200 ships. But Earth's defenses had improved too. Kate Johnson's shield technology had been refined. Human ships could now withstand Imperial weapons for longer periods. On the USS Defiant, now heavily modified with salvaged alien technology, Frank Martinez prepared for another mission. His ship was one of only 3 that had survived from the original Earth fleet. But 20 more had been built, smaller and faster, designed specifically to fight the Empire. Captain, his communications officer called. We're receiving a transmission. It's from... It can't be. What is it? Frank asked, moving to the console. Sir, it's the USS Endeavour, Captain Miller's ship. We thought it was destroyed in the first week of the war. Frank's eyes widened. Put it through. The screen flickered, showing a tired but very much alive John Miller. Captain Martinez, good to see a friendly face. John, where have you been? We thought you were dead. John's face was grim. Nearly were several times. We've been deep in Imperial space. After our first battle, we managed to capture one of their smaller ships. Susan figured out how to operate it, and we've been gathering intelligence ever since. You've been behind enemy lines for 6 months? How? They never expected us to use their own ships against them. Their security is designed to keep aliens out, not to deal with aliens who are already inside. John leaned closer to the camera. Frank, we found something important. Their supply lines. The Empire is stretched thin. They're fighting rebellions on 3 other fronts. Species they thought were fully subjugated are rising up, inspired by our resistance. Frank couldn't believe what he was hearing. We're not alone? No. And we've made contact with some of these other species. They're helping us now. We're bringing back data on Imperial fleet movements, supply schedules, command structures. Everything Admiral Rodriguez will need. When will you arrive? We're 3 days out. Keep a landing bay open for us. As Frank relayed this news to Earth, another operation was already underway. Major Nancy Garcia led a team of 12 soldiers toward an Imperial command vessel. They wore spacesuits modified with scraps of Imperial armor, making them hard to detect on enemy scanners. Remember, Nancy told her team through their secure communication system, we go in fast, get to their data center, download everything we can, and get out. No heroics, no souvenirs, her soldiers acknowledged. They had trained for this mission for weeks. Each carried weapons designed by Dr. Clark, capable of piercing Imperial personal shields. Their small craft, barely larger than a lifeboat, approached the Imperial vessel from its blind spot, another weakness Susan White had discovered in Imperial design. The Empire, confident in their superiority, had never bothered to fix small flaws in their sensor coverage. Nancy's team attached to the hull, cut their way in, and entered the massive ship. Inside, they moved quickly through corridors, avoiding Imperial soldiers when possible, eliminating them silently when necessary. They reached the data center in 20 minutes. One of Nancy's team, a computer specialist, connected their devices to the Imperial system. Beginning download, 5 minutes. Nancy positioned her team to defend the room. 5 minutes. Then we're gone. Back on Earth, Kate Johnson and Dr. Clark met in a heavily guarded facility deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Project Oversight, as they called it, was nearly complete. Will it work? Kate asked, looking at the massive device they had built. William nodded. The theory is sound. We've tested it on captured Imperial technology. Their quantum fields collapse when exposed to our disruptor waves. And they won't be expecting it? How could they? It's based on Earth physics principles they've never encountered. Their science developed along different lines. They use quantum fields for everything: shields, weapons, communications. Our disruptor targets the basic foundation of all their technology. Kate looked worried. But we only have one. If they figure out how to counter it, then we build a better one. That's what humans do, we adapt. In space, the Imperial fleet prepared for what they believed would be the final assault on Earth. War Master Vixloth had been replaced by Grand Strategist Mevnar, the Empire's most decorated military leader. Mevnar had spent his career crushing rebellions. He had never failed. Status report, Mevnar demanded from his officers. The human defenses continue to hold in key areas, his tactical officer reported. But our new weapons have destroyed 60% of their orbital capabilities. Ground resistance remains strong in the regions they call North America, parts of Asia and Australia. Europe has largely fallen. Africa is contested. Mevnar nodded. And the planet Cracker? Is it prepared? Yes, Grand Strategist. It will arrive, with the next fleet in 3 weeks. Good. The Galactic Council is tired of this prolonged conflict. They have authorized the planet's destruction if resistance continues. We will save the most useful humans for labor, but the rest will serve as an example. On Earth, Susan White worked with Patricia Nelson, decoding Imperial transmissions. They had gotten very good at breaking Imperial codes over the months of war. Patricia, Susan said suddenly, her face pale. Look at this message. The translation can't be right. Patricia read the decoded transmission, then read it again. They're going to destroy Earth, can they do that? According to this, yes. They have a weapon called a planet cracker. It's on its way. They immediately sent the information to Admiral Rodriguez. Lisa read it in her command center, now located in an underground bunker in what had once been Colorado. The surface above had been reduced to glass by Imperial bombardment. How long do we have? She asked. 3 weeks, Susan replied. Maybe less? Lisa nodded. Then it's time for Operation Scattered Thunder. Contact Captain Martinez and Captain Miller. Tell Major Garcia to prepare her teams, and inform Dr. Clark and Engineer Johnson that Project Oversight needs to be ready in 2 weeks, not 3. Across what remained of human territory, the order went out. For 6 months, humanity had been on the defensive, fighting for survival. Now they would take the fight to the Empire. On the Defiant, Frank received his orders. We're going on the offensive, he told his crew. Admiral Rodriguez has approved Operation Scattered Thunder. His tactical officer looked surprised. Sir, we're still outnumbered 10-1. Frank nodded. Yes, but we're not targeting their warships. We're going after their supply lines. Captain Miller's intelligence shows us exactly where to hit them. In her training facility, Nancy Garcia prepared her soldiers, now 200 strong, all veterans of raids on Imperial ships. We're boarding, she told them. Not just raid and retreat this time, we're taking ships. Her soldiers cheered. They had learned to fight the Imperial troops in close quarters. The aliens, used to ship-to-ship combat, were poorly trained for face-to-face fighting. Humans, with their long history of ground combat, had the advantage. In their secret lab, William and Kate worked frantically to finish Project Oversight. The device had grown. It now filled a large room with cooling systems that extended into the mountain itself. Will we be ready in time? Kate asked as they made final adjustments. William nodded. We have to be. There won't be a second chance. Across the solar system, humanity prepared for its biggest gamble yet. If they failed, Earth would be destroyed. If they succeeded, they might just survive. The turning point of the war had arrived. The Imperial ships moved through the solar system like a well-practiced dance group. They did not hurry. They did not scatter. They had done this many times before. Dr. William Clark watched them from Earth's main defense center. Screens showed the enemy fleet passing Mars. They're so confident, he said to Admiral Lisa Rodriguez, who stood next to him. Look at how they move, not even trying to hide or protect themselves. Lisa nodded. Pride comes before a fall. She picked up a communication device. All ships hold positions. Wait for my signal. In the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, Frank Martinez and his crew on the USS Defiant waited silently. Their ship had been covered with special materials that made it hard to detect. They were one of 5 ships hiding among the rocks. The plan was simple but risky. Engine status? Frank asked quietly, though he knew the enemy couldn't hear him. Running silent, Captain, his engineer replied. Power at minimum. But we can. Go to full in 10 seconds. Frank nodded. Good. Weapons? Ready, sir. Missiles loaded with Dr. Clark's new warheads. They should cut through their shields like they aren't even there. Frank hoped that was true. They only had one chance to get this right. On Earth, Patricia Nelson monitored Imperial communications. Admiral, I'm picking up their signals. They're discussing their standard attack formation. They're calling it. She paused, listening carefully. Formation 12A. Seems like they don't even bother changing their tactics anymore. Lisa smiled. Overconfidence, the greatest weakness. She turned to Dr. Clark. Are your weapons ready? William nodded. Yes. The missiles have been modified to emit the exact frequency that should disrupt their shield harmonics. If Susan's translations are correct, and if George's science team understood their technology correctly, that's a lot of ifs, Doctor. Welcome to war with an alien species, Admiral. The Imperial fleet spread out as it approached Earth. Their commander, War Master Vixlath, had replaced Kuztul after the humans had failed to surrender. But Vixlath expected this to be a simple operation. His species had conquered hundreds of worlds. One more would make little difference. Primitive defenses. Detected in orbit, his sensor officer reported. 26 vessels of minimal threat level. Ground-based weapon systems active but ineffective against our shields. Viexiloth made a gesture that passed for a smile in his species. Begin standard bombardment pattern. Target their largest military installations first, then governmental centers. Minimal force, we don't want to damage the labor pool. His weapons officer acknowledged the order. The Imperial ships began to glow as their weapon systems charged. In the asteroid belt, Frank watched his screen. They're charging weapons, he said. Get ready. On Earth, Lisa waited until all Imperial ships were committed to their attack. Then she spoke one word into her communication device. Now. Across the solar system, humanity struck back. From Earth, 100 missiles launched. Not at the Imperial ships, which would have been expected, but at the space between them. The missiles detonated, creating a web of energy that disrupted the Imperial formation. From the asteroid belt, Frank gave the order. Full power. All ships attack. The 5 hidden ships burst from their hiding places, engines flaring to life. They aimed for the rear vessels of the Imperial fleet, the ones least protected. Fire! Frank ordered. Dr. Clark's special missiles streaked toward the Imperial ships. When they hit the alien shields, something unexpected happened. Instead of being stopped, they passed through, their warheads detonating against the hulls. 3 Imperial ships erupted in flames before the fleet could react. On his command ship, Viexiloth stood in shock. Impossible. How did primitive weapons penetrate our shields? Unknown, War Master, his science officer replied, voice shaking. They shouldn't have been able to. Silence. Regroup the fleet. Target those hidden vessels. But the human attack was not finished. From Earth's moon, where the Empire had not bothered to look for threats, a second wave of missiles launched. These were larger, slower, but carried a new weapon designed by Kate Johnson. When they detonated near the Imperial ships, they released a cloud of microscopic machines that attached to the alien hulls and began to eat through the metal. 4 more Imperial ships began to drift, their power, systems failing. In Geneva, Kate watched the battle with nervous hope. The nanites are working, she said to no one in particular. They're disrupting their power conduits. On the Defiant, Frank ordered evasive maneuvers as the Imperial fleet turned to face this unexpected threat. All ships scatter and continue attacking. Don't stay in one place. The 5 human ships darted among the asteroids, using the rocks as cover, emerging to fire and then hiding again. It was a tactic the Empire had never faced before. Their usual opponents fought in organized formations, following the same rules of war the Empire had established millennia ago. Humans did not play by those rules. On Earth, Daniel Wright led the ground defense forces. They watched as some Imperial ships broke through and began bombardment. Buildings exploded under alien weapons, but the damage was less than expected. Their targeting is off, Daniel observed. They're hitting empty buildings. He turned to his communications officer. Is the deception working? Yes, sir. The holographic projectors are making it look like our cities are undamaged. They think they're hitting targets, but most of their shots are wasted. Lisa studied the battle map. 7 Imperial ships destroyed or disabled, but that left 43 still fighting. And they were learning, adapting their tactics. 3 human ships had already been destroyed. Admiral, Patricia called out, I'm intercepting new orders from their command ship. They're calling in reinforcements. Lisa's face hardened. How long do we have? Based on their communications, 3 days, maybe less. The battle continued for hours. In space, the remaining human ships fought desperately, using every trick and tactic they could think of. On the ground, cities burned, but not as many as the Empire had planned. Earth's defenses, hastily assembled but cleverly designed, took a toll on the attackers. By the end of the first day, the score stood at 12 Imperial ships destroyed or disabled, 5 human ships lost. The Empire had established a foothold on Mars, wiping out the small human colonies there. But Earth itself remained unconquered. In his command center on the largest Imperial ship, Viexiloth raged at his officers. How is this happening? They are pre-FTL primitives. They should have fallen in hours. His tactical officer spoke cautiously. War Master, they are unpredictable. They do not fight according to established protocols. Each of their ships seems to follow its own battle plan rather than a coordinated strategy. That makes no sense. War is not fought that way. Yet they have cost us 12 ships, more than any species has in the initial engagement for over 1,000 years. Baxlath turned to his communication officer. Send word to the home fleet. We require additional forces. He looked at the image of Earth on his screen. These humans will be made an example of. No species defies the Empire and survives. On the Defiant, now damaged but still fighting, Frank received new orders from Earth. Captain, Admiral Rodriguez says to fall back to Earth orbit. We've done enough damage for now. They want us to help coordinate the ground defense. Frank looked at his battered ship and tired crew. They had fought well. 2 days ago, they had been explorers, scientists, engineers. Now they were warriors. Set course for Earth, he ordered, and tell the Admiral we'll be ready for round 2 when those reinforcements arrive. As the Defiant limped back toward Earth, Frank looked out at the stars. The Empire had ruled them for 30,000 years. Humanity had just announced it would not be ruled without a fight. The war had only just begun. 3 months after the surrender of Imperial forces in the solar system, Captain John Miller and Lieutenant Susan White stood in a massive chamber on the Imperial capital world. The room was filled with alien beings, representatives of the Galactic Council, the governing body of the Empire. This was the first time humans had been invited to address the Council. "Are you ready for this?" John asked Susan quietly as they waited to be called forward. Susan nodded, though her hands shook slightly. "As ready as I'll ever be." Strange to think that a year ago I was analyzing language patterns on the Endeavor. Now I'm about to address the rulers of most of the galaxy. A tall alien with blue skin approached them. "The Council will see you now," it said in perfect English. John and Susan walked forward into the center of the chamber. Hundreds of eyes watched them, some with fear, others with curiosity, but most with a grudging respect that no human had ever received before. The head counselor, a member of the Zeth species, spoke. "Captain Miller, Lieutenant White, you stand before the Galactic Council as representatives of Earth. This is unprecedented. For 30,000 years, new species have entered the Empire as subjects, not as equals." John stepped forward. "We appreciate the invitation, Counselor. We come seeking peace." Murmurs spread through the chamber. One council member stood. "Peace? You destroyed over 50 of our ships. You damaged our supply network in 5 star systems." "After you attacked our home world without provocation," Susan replied calmly. "We defended ourselves." "A primitive species should not have been able to do what you did," another counselor said. "Our intelligence suggests you have had nuclear weapons for less than a century. You had not even achieved faster than light travel when we found you." John nodded. "That's true, but humans are quick learners." The head counselor leaned forward. "Why have you come here? To negotiate surrender terms?" Susan stepped forward now. "No. We came to establish the Sol Accords." She activated a small device projecting text into the air, a treaty written in both human and Imperial languages. "These are our terms. Earth remains independent. The Sol system is recognized as human territory. We will establish trade with the Empire on equal terms, and any species currently subjugated by the Empire that wishes to negotiate for their freedom may do so, with humans as neutral mediators." The chamber erupted in angry shouts and protests. The head counselor raised a hand for silence. "This is outrageous. You are one planet. We are thousands of worlds. 1,000 worlds that couldn't defeat one planet," John pointed out. Before the counselor could respond, the doors to the chamber burst open. A squad of Imperial guards rushed in, weapons drawn. But they were not aiming at the humans. Instead, they surrounded John and Susan protectively. "What is the meaning of this?" the head counselor demanded. The guard captain spoke quickly. "Assassins, Counselor. We detected them preparing to strike. The humans were to be eliminated during these peace talks. John and Susan exchanged glances. They had suspected this might happen. The Empire was not known for accepting defeat gracefully. This session is suspended, the head counselor announced. The humans will be escorted to secure quarters while we investigate. As they were led away, Susan whispered to John, "They took the bait." John nodded slightly. "Engineer Johnson's plan is working. Let's hope Frank and Nancy are ready for their part." While John and Susan had been occupying the council's attention, other human operations were underway. On a space station orbiting the capital world, Frank Martinez led a team toward the central computer core of the Imperial network. Using the cover story of a diplomatic mission, they had brought a special device designed by Kate Johnson. "Security systems?" Frank asked as they moved through the corridors. His tech specialist checked her scanner. "All focused on the council chambers, Captain." "Just as we predicted. They're so concerned with the formal delegation that they've left this section lightly guarded." They reached the massive door to the computer core. 2 Imperial guards stood watch, but they weren't expecting trouble so far from the diplomatic event. Frank's team subdued them quickly and silently. "Get us in," Frank ordered. The tech specialist placed Kate's device against the door. It bypassed the security systems in seconds. The door slid open, revealing a chamber filled with glowing columns of light, the central artificial intelligence that had guided the Empire's expansion for millennia. "Is this it?" one of Frank's team asked, sounding disappointed. "I expected something bigger." Frank smiled. "Size isn't everything. According to Dr. Clark's research, this AI has been running the Empire from behind the scenes for 30,000 years. It calculates probabilities, makes strategic decisions, guides the development of technology, and it's never encountered human unpredictability before." They moved to the central control panel. The tech specialist connected Kate's device. "Initiating Johnson protocol. 10 minutes until we have full access." At the same time, hundreds of light years away, Major Nancy Garcia led a fleet of newly built human ships to a different target, the main shipyard where the Empire constructed its most powerful vessels. After the defeat at Earth, Imperial forces had begun building a new type of warship, one designed specifically to counter human tactics. "Status report," Nancy ordered, as her fleet dropped out of FTL near the shipyard. 20 new Imperial warships. "Detected," her sensor officer replied. "None fully operational yet. Shipyard defense is active but minimal. They weren't expecting us here." Nancy nodded. "They thought we'd focus all our attention on the peace talks. Begin the operation." Her fleet moved forward, not to attack the shipyard, but to capture it. The ships carried 2,000 soldiers, trained in boarding actions, the tactics that had proven so effective during the Battle of Earth. "Remember," Nancy told her troops, "we need the shipyard intact. Disable, don't destroy." Back at the Imperial capital, John and Susan sat in their secure quarters, which were actually a well-appointed prison cell. They had been there for 6 hours, precisely according to plan. "Do you think they've figured it out yet?" Susan asked. John checked the small device hidden in his uniform collar. It showed a pulsing green light. "Frank's team has succeeded. They've gained access to the Imperial network," Susan smiled. "Then it's almost time." The door to their room slid open. A squad of guards entered, followed by the head counselor himself. "Captain Miller, Lieutenant White, it seems we owe you an apology. The assassination attempt was real, but it came from within our own government. There are factions that do not wish for peace." John stood. "We understand. Politics can be complicated." "Indeed." The counselor looked troubled. "However, I must inform you that we cannot accept these Soul Accords you proposed. They are too radical a departure from Imperial tradition." Susan joined John. "We thought you might say that, which is why we came prepared to demonstrate why you should reconsider." She tapped a code into her communicator. The lights in the room flickered, then stabilized. Throughout the Imperial capital, the same thing happened as Frank's team executed the final stage of their plan. What have you done? The counselor demanded. John smiled. We've introduced the Imperial Central AI to a new way of thinking. For 30,000 years, it's been calculating probabilities based on predictable patterns. We just showed it something new: human unpredictability. On cue, every screen in the room activated, showing the Imperial shipyard. Nancy's forces had captured it completely. The 20 new warships now flew human flags alongside their Imperial markings. That's impossible, the counselor whispered. Those were our most secure facilities. Nothing is impossible for humans when our survival is at stake, Susan said. But more importantly, we've shown your AI something it's never seen before, a better way. The screens changed, showing what looked like complex mathematical formulas, the AI's calculations being updated in real time as it incorporated human unpredictability into its models. The AI that has guided your empire for millennia is learning from us, John explained. It's seeing that flexibility and adaptation create stronger systems than rigid hierarchy. It's calculating that an alliance with humanity as equals will benefit the empire more than continued conflict. The counselor stared at the screens, then at the humans. You've hacked our central intelligence system? This is unprecedented. So is making peace instead of demanding subjugation. Susan pointed. Out. We're offering you a choice. Continue trying to fight us at great cost to both sides, or accept the Soul Accords and begin a new chapter in galactic history. The counselor was silent for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. In 30,000 years of imperial expansion, no species has ever done what humans have accomplished in 1 year. You turned our technology against us. You adapted faster than we could respond. You even managed to change the thinking of an AI we thought was perfect. He made a gesture of respect that Susan recognized from her studies of imperial culture. Perhaps it is time for the Empire to learn new ways. I will present the Soul Accords to the full council, with my recommendation that they be accepted. 1 week later, John and Susan stood alongside Frank, Nancy, and representatives from Earth as the Soul Accords were formally signed. The Empire acknowledged Earth as an independent power and agreed to renegotiate its relationships with other species. Operation Scattered Thunder began at midnight Earth time. 30 human ships, including the USS Defiant and the USS Endeavour, launched from hidden bases on the dark side of the moon. They did not head toward the Imperial battle fleet orbiting Earth. Instead, they flew outward toward the edges of the solar system. Frank Martinez sat in the captain's chair of the Defiant, watching as his ship accelerated past Mars. Status of the FTL drive? His engineer, nervous but excited, replied, Dr. Clark's modifications are holding, Captain. The captured Imperial technology is working with our systems. Frank nodded. This was humanity's biggest gamble yet. Dr. Clark and his team had not only studied Imperial FTL technology, they had improved it. Human ships could now travel faster than light, not as efficiently as Imperial vessels with centuries of refinement, but enough to take the fight beyond Earth. All ships reporting ready, Captain, his communications officer said. Then let's make history, Frank replied. Engage FTL on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. Space bent around the human fleet. Stars blurred. Then they were gone, leaving Earth behind. In his command ship, Grand Strategist Mevnar received the report with disbelief. What do you mean they've left the system? Where could they go? They don't have FTL capability. His science officer looked equally confused. The readings are clear, Grand Strategist. 30 vessels, all using modified versions of our own FTL technology. They've split into 5 groups, each heading in a different direction. Mevnar's face darkened. Track them. I want to know where they're going. But the human ships had already arrived at their destinations. Frank's group of 6 ships appeared near an Imperial supply depot, a massive space station orbiting a gas giant in a nearby star system. The depot was lightly defended, its commanders never expecting an attack this far from the front lines. They've spotted us, Frank's tactical officer reported. They're raising shields. Too late, Frank replied. Fire Dr. Clark's disruptors. The Defiant fired a new weapon. Not missiles or energy beams, but a wave of quantum disruption that spread outward like ripples in a pond. When it hit the Imperial shields, they flickered and died. All ships, open. Fire, Frank ordered. The human vessels unleashed everything they had. The unprotected supply depot broke apart under the assault. Thousands of tons of weapons, food, and equipment meant for the Imperial fleet at Earth exploded into space. Similar scenes played out across 5 star systems. John Miller's group hit a fuel processing center. Another team, led by one of Frank's former officers, destroyed a shipyard building new Imperial vessels. 2 more groups attacked convoy assembly points where supplies were gathered before being sent to the front. In less than an hour, the Empire's supply network for the Earth campaign lay in ruins. On Earth, the second phase of the operation began. Major Nancy Garcia led 500 soldiers in boarding actions against the Imperial fleet. Using small, fast vessels designed to evade Imperial sensors, they attached to the hulls of 20 enemy ships simultaneously. Nancy cut through the hull of an Imperial cruiser, her team right behind her. "Remember?" she told them as they entered. "Use the nerve gas first. Shoot anyone still standing. Secure the bridge and engineering." The Imperial ships designed for combat in space were surprisingly vulnerable to boarding actions. Their crews were not trained for close-quarters combat, and they never expected humans, whom they still considered primitives, to actually invade their vessels. Nancy's team moved efficiently through the corridors, deploying canisters of gas designed by Dr. Clark to affect Imperial biology. Most of the alien crew collapsed without firing a shot. Those who had protection or managed to seal their sections faced human soldiers who had spent months learning how to fight in the tight confines of starships. Within 2 hours, 15 Imperial vessels were under human control. In her command center, Admiral Rodriguez watched the operation unfold. "Status of project oversight?" she asked. Her aide replied, "Dr. Clark reports ready for deployment. Engineer Johnson is making final calibrations." Lisa nodded. "Tell them to activate on my command, and order all our ground forces to proceed with their attacks. Across Earth's surface, hiding in the ruins of cities and in underground bunkers, human resistance fighters emerged. They attacked Imperial ground forces not with large armies, but with thousands of small units, striking everywhere at once. The Imperial troops used to fighting conventional battles against conventional opponents found themselves facing an enemy that refused to mass in one place. Daniel Wright led one such group in what had once been Chicago. "Hit and run," he told his fighters. "Make them chase us, then disappear. Draw them into the ruins where their heavy weapons are useless." The Imperial commander in North America, sub-strategist Kulnar, found his forces suddenly under attack from all sides. "Status report," he demanded of his officers. "Attacks reported in 1,500 locations, Commander," his aide replied, voice shaking. "Human resistance forces are using guerrilla tactics. We're having difficulty establishing stable control zones. Where is their main army? What is their primary objective?" "There doesn't appear to be one, sir. They're just everywhere. In orbit," Lisa gave the order. "Activate Project Oversight." Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, William Clark and Kate Johnson threw the switch on their massive device. Power surged through systems built from a combination of human and stolen Imperial technology. A wave of energy pulsed outward from Earth, invisible, undetectable by Imperial sensors, but devastating to their technology. Across the solar system, Imperial ships suddenly lost power. Their quantum field generators, the heart of all their technology, simply stopped working. Shields failed, weapons went offline, communication systems died. On his flagship, now drifting helplessly, Grand Strategist Mevnar watched in horror as his mighty fleet went dark. "What is happening?" he demanded, though none of his officers could answer. Lisa's voice came over all Imperial communication channels, using their own systems against them. "Attention, Imperial forces. This is Admiral Lisa Rodriguez of Earth Defense. Your ships are disabled. Your ground forces are surrounded. The weapon we have deployed affects only your technology, not ours. We have stormed and captured 15 of your vessels. Your supply lines have been destroyed in 5 star systems. She paused, letting her words sink in. We do not wish to destroy you. We wish to end this war. Stand down your forces and prepare to receive our terms. For the first time in his long career, Mevnar faced defeat. He had underestimated these humans at every turn. They did not fight like any species the Empire had encountered before. They did not follow the established rules of warfare that had governed galactic conflict for millennia. Grand Strategist, his communication officer called. We're receiving reports from the home systems, the planet Cracker. It's been destroyed. What? How? A small group of human ships. They used our own FTL technology to reach the shipyard. They captured it, turned it against itself. Mevnar slumped in his command chair. The unthinkable had happened. The Empire, undefeated for 30,000 years, had lost a war. On Earth, celebrations began as news of the victory spread. In space, human ships surrounded the disabled Imperial fleet. Frank Martinez and John Miller, veterans of the very first contact with the Empire, led the boarding party onto Mevnar's flagship to accept his surrender. How? Mevnar asked them as they entered his bridge. How did primitives defeat the greatest empire the galaxy has ever known? John smiled grimly. You made a mistake. You judged us by your standards. You thought because we didn't have your technology, we couldn't think in ways you couldn't imagine. Frank added, your empire became too comfortable, too set in its ways. You forgot what it means to fight for survival. In the ruins of Chicago, Daniel Wright gathered with his fighters to hear the news. The Imperial troops were surrendering all across Earth. The war, it seemed, was over. What happens now? One of his soldiers asked. Daniel looked up at the night sky where stars were visible through the smoke of battle for the first time in months. Now? Now we rebuild, and we make sure they never threaten us again. Across the solar system, humanity had proven itself, not just to the Empire, but to the galaxy. They were not primitive, they were not weak, they were not to be underestimated. They were human, and they had just changed the course of galactic history.